Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jessica Flynn and I am the owner and maker of Flynn Sisters Boutique. And today we are going to be doing a drip cup tutorial, much requested. A lot of you guys have asked me to do a video on this, and I'm going to show you guys how I use DIY epoxies sheaths thick. I think that's what it's called. They're thickening powder for epoxy to create those really cool 3D drips down the side of your cups. I'm going to show it to you in some really simple, fun, kind of monochromatic designs that I thought were really super cool. And you know, I'm going to have all the links listed down below in the description box on where you can find these things. You might even find some discount codes for you there as well. So that's enough chit chat for me. Let's go ahead and get started. So in this tutorial, I'm going to focus more on how to create the drips than I will a start to finish tutorial like we normally do. So I'm starting with a cup that I've already prepped. I've spray painted it hot pink and I've glittered it with epoxy method glitter, just like I normally would with all my glitter cups. I let that glitter dry for 2 to 3 hours and then I sealed it with this spray sealer from Rust-Oleum. And I'm using a 24-ounce taper cup from Craft Haven, and it has a really sharp bottom to it, and a lot of people have a hard time finishing these bottoms, so I'm going to show you guys how I handle these. I've got about 5 milliliters of epoxy left over from a different project, and I just poured some of that same hot pink glitter that we use to glitter our cup into the epoxy. I'm going to stir it up really well, and then we are going to pour that into the bottom well of our cup. I'm going to show you what I mean here. This is just going to make a sparkly bottom with really minimal effort, so we're not having to fight the edge of those rims when we go to try and smooth out our epoxy later. So I'm going to pour that little bit of a sparkly epoxy into our bottom well here and spread it out with a stir stick. And once I have it spread out, you know, edge to edge of that bottom well, I'm going to set my cup just like it is upside down here on a clean and level surface where it's like protected from debris, and I'm going to let it dry for at least 8 hours, and then we can move into epoxying our cup like we normally would. So I have about 2 coats of epoxy on my cup here, and I've done all the necessary sanding that I needed to do. Same sanding routine that I always do. And I applied my decal. If you guys want to use the same decal that I used, I would recommend weeding your decal with all the largest pieces first and saving those tiny detailed lines to weed once they've been transferred on the cup. So if you'll see, I transferred like the whole decal without weeding the inside of these outlines, and then I weeded the inside of those outlines once it was on the cup, and it made my life so much easier. This actually did not take me long at all, and you can see we've got a beautifully fine detailed decal that went on with hardly any drama. So anyway, I just wanted to show you guys those 2 techniques that went into this overall cup design. So once we've got our decal on there, I wiped my cup down with tack cloth to get off any kind of debris or lint or fuzz. I just started doing this with my cups after I clean them and dry them off with coffee filters, because I kept finding that I was still getting lint and debris and it was driving me nuts. So I saw a tip somewhere to use tack cloth over your cups, and I think it was brilliant. And so I finally tried it after all these years, and it's amazing. It works so well. I'll put a link down below in the description box where you can find this same tack cloth. It doesn't leave any kind of like wax or anything on your cups. It's just going to take away any of those little fuzzies that cause you drama later. So Here we go. We've got our cup fully coated. Before we move into our drip process, we want to make sure that our cup is completely smooth, because for this cup, the drip will be the very last step that we do. So pretty much we want to have a completely smooth and finished cup before we move on into our drips. All right, and so once we've got our cup completely finished and smooth and it's been drying for well over 12 hours, we're ready to do our drips. I've got 20 milliliters of epoxy already mixed here, and I just added a couple drops of Diva Pink acrylic paint from Apple Barrel. And then I'm going to add in a couple generous scoops of this, I think it's called Shocking Tulip mica powder from Simply Sarah's Custom Creations. This pink is so pigmented, it's like super bright fluorescent pink. It's gorgeous. And when you're mixing in your paint and your micas, definitely remember only a couple drops of paint, no more than that. You do not want your epoxy to be stringy or runny for this. And you also want to make sure that your mica powder is completely mixed in and no clumps. So you want to really mix this in well here to make sure that you have beautiful, even distribution and everything's smooth and beautiful. Okay. Depending on the look that you're going for, you really want to make sure that you're picking colors that are super pigmented and giving you total opaque coverage through your epoxy, so that you're not going to be able to see through these drips. So you really want to get some good vibrant color going in here. I'm going to add my thickening agent now. This is She Thick from DIY Epoxy. You do want to make sure that you are wearing respiratory, some kind of like mask when you're working with this stuff, because it's super fine and like a really light dust, and it's going to fly up in the air and you don't want to be breathing this stuff in. So definitely make sure that you're wearing a mask when you're working with this stuff. You should also be wearing gloves too, but I forgot to put my gloves on. So anyway, we're just mixing in a couple of scoops here to start. You want to make sure you add a small amount at a time, because we can always add more, we just can't take away. So just add in a little bit at a time, wait for it to like fully distribute itself in the epoxy and like soak it up. And you're going to notice that it's almost like when you mix powdered sugar into a frosting, how it'll mix in there and then it kind of melts into it. That's sort of similar to what this stuff does. So I ended up adding like a couple more small scoops to what we were doing here until you can start to see ribbons in your epoxy. So if you were to pull that mixing stick up and let it pour down, you would kind of see ribbons forming in your epoxy. But I want to make it really clear here that we're not going to use this stuff. This stuff isn't really going to work to make your drips happen faster. So it's not going to, it will thicken your epoxy up really thick really quickly, but it's not going to take it to a point that it's going to set up quickly. And what we want is for the epoxy to set up pretty quickly, and while it's still thin enough to drip down, if that makes sense, because we want the epoxy to set up fast enough before it starts to drip down too far on the cup, but we also want it to be thick enough to where it forms those 3D drips that we're looking for. So I'm just going to take this popsicle stick thing and kind of spread on a good size amount. You could see what I'm doing here, okay? We're spreading that on all the way up at the top rim there, not inside the rim, but right around the outside top rim. Okay. And I like to do like an even amount along here. So pretty evenly distributed along the top rim. Nothing crazy. So we're just going to carry that all the way around the cup. If you're noticing, like, you can kind of see the texture of my epoxy, that's really exactly what you want. It's not too thick, but it's also not too thin. And my epoxy has been sitting for a good 45 minutes before we started this process. So after we mixed in the She-Thick, I still let it sit because while it did thicken my epoxy, it didn't bring it to a place where it would set up quick enough after it was dripping down the cup, if that makes sense. So the formula that worked for me was mix in my She-Thick, mix in my colors, and let the epoxy sit for about 30 to 45 minutes. Okay, the temperature of the room that I'm working in is almost dead around 70 degrees. Okay, I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it seemed kind of important to me. Anyway, so I'm just spreading this all the way around the cup and making sure that it's connected up at that top rim. Don't worry if some got inside your top rim there. We'll clean that up later. Okay. And by this point, after we've spread it on the cup, you should notice it starting to drip a little bit. Okay. It's going to start pulling itself down. Okay. Let gravity do its job. You see here the beginning formations of our drips. And if you're looking around and you see some areas where you would like to have a more pronounced drip, you can go back to your little pot of epoxy real quick and get like a thinner epoxy stir stick, like my metal stir sticks, and you can add more to a section that you would want a more pronounced drip, like say around the back where there's not a decal or whatever the case may be. So I'll show you here how I did that. I really just took one of my little metal stir sticks and grabbed about a pea-size amount and just kind of smeared that into the place that I wanted like a longer, more pronounced drip. Like I felt like this area right here needed a little more. So I added about a pea-sized amount there, just kind of smeared it into that place. And it's going to smooth itself out and drip with everything else. You just want to make sure that you don't do that too far into this process. You'll want to do it, if you need to, do it pretty quickly after you do that initial application, if that makes sense. Okay. After that, I just let it sit in a safe place in my craft room and kind of did some other stuff while I watched this, and I'm showing a time lapse of how long it took for those drips to come down. This is exactly the speed that I want them to come down the cup. Once I felt like they were getting a little bit too far or right where I wanted them, I flipped it upside down for 10 minutes on a level surface and then flipped it back over. I would say that it took about an hour for my epoxy to stop moving. And then I just let it sit here upright like this overnight. And that was it. So to finish this up, you're going to want to clean your rim up and all that excess epoxy that we might have gotten up there. So I'm going to use a sharp craft knife, be careful please, and scrape all that excess epoxy off my top rim there. This is how I finish all of my cups. So if you've ever wondered how we do the finishing and cleanup on our cups, this is how. So you're just going to run your knife along this top edge here, picking off all those large pieces of epoxy. And once we've got mostly everything done, I remove the cup arm from the inside of my cup. We're going to use a paper towel and some acetone to clean up any of the excess paint or epoxy or glitter and things that might have gotten into the inside of our cup. I'm using regular acetone that I get from the hardware store and just regular paper towels from Costco. And you're just going to clean out that inside rim as good as you can. Anything else that might have fallen on the inside of your cup. I use cup arms from the Bowen. So they pretty much seal off the inside of my cup, which is really nice. You can find a link to where I get my cup arms and my cup turner system down below in the description box. I also like to spray out the inside with some rubbing alcohol just to doubly make sure that I got all the stuff out. You want to get these completely clean. I'll also run my fingers along that inside rim there to kind of feel any sort of bumps or things that I might have missed or I can't really see with my eyes. You want to make sure that every single speck of epoxy or glitter or anything is, even paint, is completely cleaned out of there, and the inside of that cup should look just as new as it did when we first started. Once I've got everything cleaned out, I will take my cup inside to the sink and I will wash the inside with dish soap and water. That's it for this tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I learned a lot when making this cup. I think it's really important if you're attempting this technique for the first time to maybe practice on an old cup, just so you can kind of get your ratios down and your timing on your epoxy to get it right, because that part is probably the trickiest about this whole thing. But other than that, it's pretty simple to do. I had a lot of fun. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. We do upload videos every Wednesday and Saturday. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you soon. If you love this video, you could check out our last video here. Also be sure to find us on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and of course subscribe for all our new videos that come out every Wednesday and Saturday. Thanks so much for watching. See you soon.